Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Welcome to Murder and Mimosas.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Danica.
Together as a mother and daughter duo, we host Murder Mimosas, true crime podcast with an episode released every Saturday at 10 a.m. so you can listen to it during prime brunch time. While we don't require a mimosa, we do highly recommend one. All of our episodes are cases that we found really interesting or just really stuck with us because we hope they'll do the same for you. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcast.
Hey there, this is a true crime podcast with adult language. Bet you didn't know adults had their own language, did ya? Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. Happy New Year, everyone! I know we're a couple weeks in already, but I forgot to wish you it my last collaboration episode. Can you all believe it's been 4 years since we were in quarantine? And I finally made a friend after 2 years here in Oregon. She lives down the street and she's just the sweetest lady. We have some commonalities, which is great. And I think one of the biggest ones is we both can't stand Trump. I had a good giggle when she told me if she sees him on television, she can't even look at him. And also, she can't find a remote fast enough to change the channel. So here's a shout out to Charlene should she ever listen to this podcast. Find me on the socials. On Facebook is Beyond the Rainbow, and just about everywhere else is Rainbow Crimes. Consider joining my Patreon, where for less than a price of a cup of coffee per month, you get ad-free, early release episodes, and a bonus episode at the end of every month. I have an update on the Brianna Gay case that I mentioned many episodes ago as a true crime quickie. If you remember, Brianna was a 16-year-old trans girl in the UK. She was stabbed to death 28 times by a teenage boy and a teenage girl. Both the boy and the girl that stabbed her had an unhealthy obsession with violence, torture, and murder. Well, they were convicted of killing Brianna on December 20th, 2023. Both the boy and girl faced mandatory sentences of life in prison. Brianna had so much life left to live, and these two little brats, they took that from her. It's a small consolation, but there will be some unicorn justice for Brianna. I've also been very bummed out over all the hate in the world, to be honest. My friend Jasmine of Hands Off, my podcast, she sent me an article about a very kind trans woman who was murdered a couple days after Christmas. On Christmas, she opened up her heart and her home. She served food to those less fortunate and those who might feel lonely around the holidays. And then she was murdered by a delivery driver in her neighborhood who was delivering food. This was on December 27, 2023. It's a sad irony, I know. Her name was Megan Riley Lewis. She lived in Bel Air, which is a neighborhood in Maryland. And if this tells you anything about the upbeat kind of woman she was, she'd sign off on all her emails, texts, and DMs. Stay sparkly. Rest in power, Megan, and may you stay sparkly in heaven. Out of curiosity, I started to look into why there's so much hate. In particular, why so much hate towards the LGBTQ community? And aside from Trump and his cronies, because I blame him for everything wrong in the world, this is what I found. Studies show that people with negative attitudes towards the LGBTQ community, number one, they're less likely to have any personal contact with any LGBTQ people. I mean, what the fuck kind of person doesn't have at least one gay friend or family member? They must live in a hole or under a rock. Number two, they're more likely to have peers who have negative feelings about the LGBTQ, especially male peers. Number three, they're more likely to have lived in small towns or areas where attitudes towards the LGBTQ are negative, such as southern states of the United States. Canadian prairies, and other rural areas, especially if they lived in that kind of area during their adolescence, which is when they'd be the most impressionable. Number 4, they're more likely to be older and less educated. Well, obviously less educated, right? And if they're older, it's only because they're stuck in their ways and how they were taught. Number 5, they're more likely to be highly religious, attend their churches regularly, and subscribe to very conservative ideology with their beliefs. That sounds very correct to me. Conservative churches tend to spew hate about topics and people they don't understand, and then they have the nerve to tell you, everyone is made in God's likeness. Number 6, they're more likely to express more traditional roles where gender is concerned in their personal lives. Women should be barefoot and pregnant, and men are the kings of their castles. Right. Number 7, they're more likely to manifest high levels of authoritarianism and related personality traits. It's their way or the highway individuals, where everything is black and white and there's no shades of gray. And finally, number 8, heterosexuals tend to have more bias against LGBTQ members of their own gender than those of the opposite sex. This gets a little murky where trans folk are concerned, I believe. And I'm not so sure how correct that is. I found this article conducted by social scientists to be mostly accurate, with the exception of this last one here. And I do think that they left out those who are questioning their own sexuality or gender identity, and those are the people whose urges scare them. It's much easier to hate what you fear, but perhaps it's secretly covered as part of the list of 8 that I just presented to you. I just thought I'd share that and see if you guys agree with those statistics. Now that we've discussed hate, it's time to talk about love. Well, maybe that's not completely right. How about feelings of love and desire that turn into hate because the obsession is so strong and their object of affection maybe doesn't feel the same way? But to put yourself in the place of the person who's obsessed, has your heart ever felt so much emotion for someone else you thought it might break you? Have you ever felt so obsessed with your feelings for another person that others looking in might think it's creepy, but you just don't care? Well, this is kind of what happened for one professor of the prestigious Mount Holyoke College. This is a liberal arts school for women in South Hadley, Massachusetts. I had to pronounce it Massachusetts like that because someone on YouTube corrected me, as I did a case from this state before and I said Massachusetts, which I do when I don't slow down and enunciate it properly. 50-year-old professor of art Rie Hachiyanagi always seemed so calm and professional in her classroom as she taught her students the fine art of papermaking from plant material. Rie was also good friends with a fellow professor. This was a professor of geology, Lauret Savoy. But Rie had it in her head she was passionately in love with Lauret, so much so it overcame her. I mean, come on, what wasn't to love about Lauret? She had beautiful skin, which was a very light milk chocolate coloring. She was very caring, and she was willing to lend an ear to someone in need. She was also very intelligent. She authored and co-edited many books on the subject of her studies, geology. Lauret was a nature lover and just so easy to get along with. What Rie felt was definitely more than infatuation, and although Rie had other girlfriends in the past, Lauret, she knew, was her soulmate and the one she wanted to spend every waking moment with. But why? Why did Lauret not share her feelings? December 23rd, 2019. Rie had called Lauret to ask if she could drop by to discuss a recent breakup she was going through. Lauret, who was always there when a friend needed her, told Rie of course she could come by. Rie stopped by Lauret's home late that night around 11 p.m. Lauret invited her inside, and when Lauret turned her back, Rie attacked her with a rock, and she knocked Lauret to the floor. Rie then began pummeling Lauret with her fists. Rie's adrenaline level was high, and as she continued the beating of her friend, Lauret lay stunned and bleeding on her hardwood floor. Rie grabbed a fireplace poker. Lauret stammered, "Why are you doing this, Rie?" And Rie replied, "Because I've loved you for years and you should have known that." Lauret's torture continued. Rie found pruning shears in the garage, and she told Lauret she was going to disfigure her and blind her, and then she would murder her. Rie commented on all the blood Lauret had lost, and that she would probably die soon. The abuse went on for 4 long hours, and finally Lauret was able to convince Rie that she felt the same way about Rie. She too had been in love with Rie for years. Now, this seemed to give Rie a sense of comfort, and it de-escalated the rage within Rie. With that, towards the end of the 4 hours, having professed her love for Rie too, Lauret was able to talk Rie into calling 911. It was now the middle of the night on Christmas Eve 2019. Rie dialed the phone and told the police dispatcher she found her friend Lauret in a pool of her own blood. She said Lauret was semi-conscious and barely breathing when she came over to check on her. Rie continued that it appeared someone had broken into her friend's house, and the door was open when she got there. Rie also told police it appeared there were signs of a struggle as well. When police arrived at Lauret's home, they found her in pretty bad shape. She had broken bones in her nose and eye area, along with punctures and lacerations all about her head and face. Rie was covered in blood too, and she told the police it was from holding her friend. Police noted that there didn't seem to be any signs of a struggle. With Lauret barely clinging to life, EMTs were able to stabilize her until she made it to the hospital. Lauret would survive the attack by her supposed good friend and colleague. Rie was someone Lauret considered a close friend at one time, but now she is plagued with PTSD and nightmares, which is something she still suffers from today. Lauret also continues to have nerve damage and some other physical disabilities from the attack, including migraines. Rie was arrested on Christmas Eve late afternoon, after Lauret told the police about the night of her Christmas Eve attack. When the police showed up at Rie's home to arrest her, in her possession she had Lauret's cell phone, eyeglasses, and keys. Rie claimed she was innocent, and she held on to the not guilty plea until the time of trial. Lauret told the prosecution, "I've struggled to find a word that could hold in its meaning of both the attack and my experience of it. The closest I've found is this: severe or excruciating pain or suffering, anguish, agony, torment, the infliction of such. This is a definition of torture. For 4 hours, I experienced literal torture of my body and of my mind, not knowing if I would survive the next minute, yet needing to find some way to save my life. The emotional, physical, financial, and professional impacts of this crime have been huge, and they continue. Now the defendant's violation of me is becoming part of my public persona that I did not choose. She's invaded my privacy, my career, my life." Lauret, who is formerly from Berkeley, California, has had over 30 job proposals, but because of the attack, she's been unable to accept a position at any college or university. This has also taken a huge toll on her financially, because her insurance did not cover a good portion of her medical bills. Rie's defense attorney made the case that up until that fateful night, Rie had been an exemplary citizen, a beloved professor of art with no criminal record. He stated, though, that she has, however, struggled with anger issues her whole life, and she was never allowed to express her anger, so it was bottled up, and it finally came to a head that night. He continued that Rie was distraught, to say the least, and since her incarceration, she's been a model prisoner and a leader. But the judge at Rie's trial claimed that the case had been one of the most horrific set of facts he's ever heard. I mean, he said, until the attack, Hachiyanagi was known as a respected individual with a clean record. But on the other hand, I have this defendant who tried to torture to death for over 4 hours someone who wasn't an enemy but a friend. Hachiyanagi had a repressed childhood, work stress, the breakup of a relationship. But I still don't see these as adequate explanations for what happened. Professor Savoy is certainly a victim of a horrific crime. But that's not what I'm going to remember. I'm going to remember that she had the presence of mind and the courage to convince her attacker not to kill her. As her body was failing her, she used her mind to save herself. That's remarkable. Since the trial took place during our dear friend COVID-19's arrival, the trial was held via a 4-screen monitor, like Zoom or Skype. One screen had the judge, one screen for each the district attorney and the defense attorney, and one screen for Rie. Rie was found guilty on 9 charges, including attempted murder, assault, armed assault, and battery. In Lauret's victim impact statement, she said, "She betrayed my trust. She invaded my home and tried to kill me with premeditated violence. The cruelty she wielded with weapons and expressed in words was extreme." Rie was sentenced 10 to 12 years, minus the 632 days already spent in prison for her attack on Lauret, along with 3 years of probation after time served, an ankle monitor for a year after she's released, and she's mandated to never be in contact with Lauret again. Damn, you think you know someone you've been friends with for years, and then they come into your home, your sanctuary, your safe place, and they attack you nearly to death. That's just so crazy to me. Why couldn't she have just came over and said, "Hey, Toots, you know, I've had a thing for you for years now. What do you say?" And if Lauret said, "I'm flattered, honey, but I don't swing that way," then so be it. You can't just torture someone into loving you or having feelings of attraction for you. If you could, I'm sure a lot of us wouldn't be single right now, would we? Obsession is such an odd animal. I was reading that obsession can be a form of OCD, which makes sense, I guess. After all, the O in OCD stands for obsessive. The article went on to say psychologists disagree on how people become obsessive. Some think it's in our DNA and something that we inherit naturally, while others believe it's some type of chemical imbalance within a person. And yet others believe it can be triggered by a traumatic brain injury, a bacterial or viral infection, and stress. I don't know, I kind of believe the second one, that it's some type of chemical imbalance within a person. But I also think we can all be prone to some type of obsession in our lives. And that's just Dr. CJ spouting off. Most of us, when something like this happens, we say, "Oh, they snapped." Rie definitely snapped. She was coming off a breakup with someone else and just decided Lauret knew she was in love with her. This kind of perplexes me. How was Lauret supposed to know this unless Rie was a big girl and used her words to say it beforehand? I'm just glad Lauret had the wherewithal to keep herself alive. And I hope someday she'll be able to function past the trauma she was put through. Our true crime quickie case is from Australia. Ooh, another Australia case. Only this one is a much more recent one than the family murders that I covered a couple episodes ago. This one happened in 2022. Subsequently, there unfortunately is no resolution for it yet, but I have high hopes there will be justice for the victim soon. 21-year-old Adam Marriott sometimes went by Ashton Dennis on social media accounts. Adam was a sensitive guy and an artist. Friends of Adam described him as kind, caring, and always there when you needed him. Adam had moved to Coomera in Queensland in 2019 with his childhood friend Anna. In 2022, things were finally starting to look up for Adam as he had just started a new job at a liquor store. When Adam first moved to Coomera, he had met a man named Glenn Tiplett. Glenn worked in the construction business as a roofer, and he was 17 years older than Adam. The two began dating, and then the natural progression of going from casual dating to a relationship commitment happened. The two men were together 2 years off and on. To say their relationship was toxic might be an understatement. 4 weeks before Adam's death, Adam had broken things off for good with Glenn, and he moved out of Glenn's house. This did not please Glenn at all. In fact, he started to stalk Adam. Glenn knew where Adam went, who he saw, and so on. Adam still retained care of Glenn's dog, however. But even so, Glenn continued to use his cell phone and internet to harass Adam. Finally, the evening of February 9, 2022, after a few drinks when Adam was feeling brave from downing his liquid courage, he made contact with Glenn. He told him he was on his way over to return his dog. Adam then called his friend Anna and told her what he planned on doing. Over the phone, Anna begged Adam not to go. But with the alcohol affecting his judgment, Adam didn't listen to his friend's wise warning, and he went to Glenn's anyway with the dog around 11 p.m. 45 minutes after arriving at Glenn's townhouse the two men once shared together, the home was on fire, and neighbors who saw smoke billowing from the townhouse's windows called emergency services. Firefighters found Adam's body in the burnt embers. But where was Glenn? And more importantly, where was the dog? For all of us animal lovers, I just want you to know there was no report on the dog's well-being. I am hoping the dog is okay, though. Glenn had left the home shortly after it caught on fire, and he drove to a work friend's home, and he asked that friend for help. It would seem Glenn had extensive burns on his body, and he was taken to the hospital by the friend. Dude, if you can drive yourself to a friend's house, why can't you drive yourself to the hospital? And where's your fucking dog? February 15th, Glenn was arrested as police believe Glenn intentionally set the fire in his townhouse that killed Adam. Glenn claimed he was trying to stop Adam from taking his own life when a fire broke out. I think the only spontaneous fire breaking out, my dude, is Satan's fury from the lies you're telling. But that's just my opinion. Glenn is still the police's top suspect, and no trial date has been set yet. But he has been charged with Adam's murder, arson, and a number of stalking offenses. I'll try to keep following this case to see if we can get some resolution from it soon. Rest in power, Adam. Wow! This episode came just in time for National Stalking Awareness Month. And honestly, I did not plan it that way. Mostly because I didn't realize there was a National Stalking Awareness Month. Both of these were cases where stalkers have taken or tried to take someone they claim to love's life. And some stalking facts that might be important to know are 1 in 5 lesbians and 1 in 9 gay men have experienced stalking victimization in their lifetime. And those numbers just seem extremely high to me. Of the stalking offenders, 64% of them pursue their victims at least once a week. Many do it daily using more than one method. 78% of stalkers use more than one means of approach. 19% of stalkers use a weapon to threaten or harm their victims. And 31% of stalkers have stalked before. I think those are pretty scary statistics. With Glenn, he seemed like the "if I can't have you, no one can" type of stalker. And actually, that kind of goes for Rie as well. It's really hard to know if someone you let into your life is capable of taking your life. I think the best thing we can do is just trust in ourselves to make the right choices on who we let in, be it romantic or platonic. Now I know it's only January, warriors, but I wanted to give everyone time to plan on being at the next True Crime Paranormal Festival in July. This year, it's going to be held in Denver, Colorado. And I had so much fun at the one last year in Austin. I'm going to go again to the one this year, and I hope to see some Rainbow Warriors there. Are you worried about costs? Fear not. This festival is designed with you in mind. An affordable experience without sacrificing quality. There's no inflated costs, just a weekend packed with authenticity, education, and networking. Have you ever wished for genuine one-on-one interactions with your favorite creators? Well, now's your chance. To find out more, go to the website truecrimepodcastfestival.com. And trust me, guys, it's an incredible experience. And everyone is so friendly and helpful. I love you, Rainbow Warriors. You matter. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.